Hello and welcome into another edition of CreekCast. I am your host, Brooks Carter, Director of Media for Cahola Creek Football, with the head coach, Drew Carter, as we are 2 days away from kicking off the high school football season here in Northwest Georgia, where Cahola Creek will travel over to Tunnel Hill. Really excited about that. We are one of two games taking place in the area in Northwest Georgia, with the other being Ringgold and Dade County. So kind of have a little bit of a stage to ourselves Thursday night. It's going to be a lot of fun. We'll get into kind of discussing that here and just a little bit later on in the show. But first, want to welcome in Coach Carter. Coach, y'all have been grinding away for several weeks now, and it's finally here.
Yeah, and that's kind of the message to the kids as we make it step by step and draw nearer to the season, because it gets harder and harder to motivate the guys and for them to stay focused on day-to-day tasks and the drills and that kind of stuff. So as you start getting further away from summer and getting closer and closer to fall season, you have to remind them of that, and it helps them to stay focused and kind of starts getting their mouth watering a little bit, and their appetite going. And us having the contact camp back in July and then now the two scrimmages feel like that they've been able to kind of get their appetite going a little bit.
Yeah, so let's reflect back on the two scrimmages here as we kind of get going here. We had the jamboree down at Model. It wound up kind of being a really late night.
Yeah.
Mother Nature provided some stuff that was out of our control, but I thought I saw some really good glimpses in that, in those two kind of mini games, as I'll call them, against Lafayette and Model. One thing I came away really impressed with was the defense was lights out, with the exception of one play, which wound up being the difference if you look at the final score from the mini game with Lafayette. But I mean, they played in their backfield all night, and that was a theme that continued into the Gordon Central scrimmage as well. That was an expectation, I assume, from you and from defensive coordinator Ricky Holiday, as I've talked with him. He expects a big year out of the defense, especially in the front seven. Saw some glimpses on offense. Made two field goals. That's really promising from a new
Mhm.
kicker. Let's go back to 2 weeks ago, talk a little bit about that and how you think the team made, build on the positive things and clean some things up going into the Gordon Central scrimmage, which y'all wound up winning 21-0 and had a pretty impressive effort there.
Yeah, the Jamboree game really was a perfect ingredient when I look at it as a head coach, because there was enough good to give us confidence of what we're doing as a coaching staff and our players. But then there was just enough bad where we could really coach them hard. You mentioned the big play. It was really both mini games. There was a long pass that Model made too that set them up for score, and that was really all they got. So the message there was, it's kind of what our theme has been through the off season as we're working. We can't have inconsistent focus, and that was what we were able to correct off of those. You feel like, and really be able to sink into the guys. As good as we played defensively, you got two plays and that could get you beat. But because we can't have those lapses in focus, because we think that we're playing really well and we're shutting them down, one or two plays can turn the whole complexion of the ball game around. So it was nice to have that blend of stuff going on, in terms of we got a lot of good with our confidence, and then there's some stuff that we've got to clean up, like you said, and we can really coach them hard. And the kids responded to that, and I think that's the progress we saw from Jamboree to the Gordon Central scrimmage. And that's what I keep telling people, is by no means are we satisfied with that, and we can't be satisfied with that. That's got to be just the tip of the iceberg for us of, this is what we can become. Can we continue that kind of progress?
Yeah, and looking at the Gordon Central scrimmage, really a clean ball game from the most part, especially from your quarterback. Waylon Belials wound up with a 35-yard touchdown run. Had a beautiful deep ball to a newcomer, Caden Moore, who we didn't talk a lot about when I talked with Coach Chad Brewer, the receivers coach. I don't. That was a couple of weeks ago when we did when I recorded all the coaching assistant coach position previews. But he had a big night too. He's a newcomer who's I guess returned back home after living in South Carolina for a few years. He looked great, but Waylon, man, really had what I'm describing as a clean ball game. I think he had one bad pass that almost got intercepted, but that's really the only mistake I saw from him on film.
Yeah, I texted him Saturday morning after the scrimmage and told him I thought that was the best he's looked. From a whole view of playing quarterback, it was just polished. Made good decisions. I mean, every ball seemed like he threw was on the money because we had a couple of opportunities where we were hitting, short and intermediate throws, and the guys never broke stride. They're able to make yards after the catch, and it's setting our offense and keeping us clicking. And then you look from just a leadership standpoint too. We were in and out of the huddle clean. He had good command, and then everything just kind of feeds off of that. If he's playing that way, he's commanding the huddle that way, everybody else feels more calm and confident going forward. So I can't say enough about how well he played. I hope that's the tip of the iceberg for him because I think he's got more room to progress. Because, really, this will be game 11 as a starter for him, So in the grand scheme of things, still in the early parts of his career, which is very optimistic and exciting for us.
Yeah, let's dig in a little deeper on the quarterback position as the head coach, you're also the quarterback's coach. So we didn't have an actual preview on the quarterback position like we did with our other 9 assistant coaches with their position groups that we've put out here over the last couple of weeks, which, by the way, you can binge those along with this episode all on our YouTube channel. I got them all up. If you want to do it Netflix style, you can hang out and get your fix on all the Cahola Creek football stuff on our YouTube channel. So I've seen where several of you have already started watching all that, so we appreciate that. But let's talk about the quarterback position a little more in detail. One thing the comparison I keep making in my head, not necessarily a comparison from a skill set standpoint, but just from a timeline as a starting quarterback over the career at Cahola Creek. I immediately go back and think of Case Kinnaman, who was a 3-year starter, who started as a sophomore and made a big leap as a junior, and an even bigger leap as a senior. But what did you like? Are you feeling like you're seeing some of the same leaps and progression from Waylon going from young sophomore quarterback who made a lot of mistakes last year, did some good things for sure, really did a lot better things in the second half of his sophomore year. Are you seeing kind of the same progression from Waylon that you saw from Case?
Absolutely. And like you say, you got to look at them separately, but overall in a grand scheme, I think you're right on there. And that's the nature of it. When you've got to start a guy younger, freshman, sophomore, there's going to be some bumps along the road. Unfortunately for Waylon last year, you felt like he had plenty of ability and talent. He was also having to go through that with a lot of other young starters too. So he didn't really have anybody to elevate him in those terms. They all kind of just went through it together in terms of, first year starting linemen, some of those guys, young receivers. So they worked through it together. But I think what you're going to see is those guys grow together. And now Waylon can play distributor and elevate those guys to a higher level because I think that's what he is. He's kind of a catalyst to our offense. Part of what we saw is, I, as a play caller, started figuring out obviously what he's comfortable with and what he's best at in the passing game, but also what he's comfortable with in the run game. He doesn't give us the explosiveness of a Case Kinnaman or a Chase Ward, but he's a very willing, deceptive, and tough runner. So we've kind of identified how he can help our offense in those ways too. So he's a very dynamic piece, and he's very valuable to our football team for all those reasons.
Yeah, he told me after the model and Lafayette scrimmage, specifically the Lafayette one, that He said, "Yeah, that's what the scoreboard said, but I couldn't run all night. I was like, anytime anybody got close to me, they blew the play dead." He was like, I would have scored twice on 2 touchdown runs in that game," is what he told me. So,
Yeah, he was confident in that too, and that's huge to hear. Yeah, they actually, which I'm fine with. It's a scrimmage. We want to protect those guys. They were blowing it dead at the line of scrimmage, and he pulled the ball. I know 4 times that would have been 10+ yard chunk plays, but they blow the play dead, and it's 2nd and 10. Um,
mhm.
but hey, you see how big he is and how strong he is, but he's pretty nimble to be the size that he is. He's a really good basketball player too, so that helps. So he's not just a guy that's just looking to come out there and run over somebody. He's got some good moves for a big boy rumbling through the secondary.
But he can run you over, and that's for
Yeah, he
sure.
will do that.
But yeah, sitting at 6'3", 200 plus pounds, he kind of reminds me of when he starts running of to make and us as Alabama fans, he kind of reminds me of Jake Coker a little bit when he gets out of the pocket and starts moving. Um, Jake Coker would run you over too, and that was that's what Waylon kind of reminds me of, moving out of the pocket. But looking big picture here at what you've got as we head into the season. You got 20 starters back. Really, only we're replacing Isaac McGill, which is a vital piece up front. But we got a promising young freshman with Tyler Collier. We talked a little bit about that with the offensive line preview with Coach David Elsenrath. He seems to have progressed and really gotten comfortable at the center position. And then other than that, our biggest piece we replaced on the edge was our leading touchdown receiver last year, Andrew Russell, who was all region honorable mention. That's the only 2 starters we're replacing, and both of those are offensive guys. Got all 11 starters back on defense. And the consistent theme I got from all of our assistant coaches when talking to them, and I know that's a direct reflection of the message that you have as a head coach, is expectations have been elevated. Everyone is expecting these players to have progressed and perform at a higher level this year with all of all of their lumps that they've taken, and all of them have at least 10 varsity starts under their belt for the most part. Some of them have 20. If you're Chevy Joyce, you have 31. But the expectations have been elevated this year, and there's an expectation to not just stay in ball games, but win ball games this year.
Yeah, and I think the most important part of that is obviously the coaching staff is going to feel that way and challenge our guys to that. But it hadn't been hard, is I think the most important part, because our players responded to that. When I met with them following last season, going into the off season, that's the message I got as a unit, as a whole team. That's the expectation they had for themselves, and they've answered the call, not with their words, but with their commitment level and how they work, and everything that kind of goes with that.
Yeah, and with that, obviously, I think when you go 1-9 and have a year like you had last year, that's motivation enough. But when you look at some of the media outlets and the way that our program is being portrayed, they kind of talk about Cahola Creek like that 2-3 year run that we had where our record was above 500 from 21 through 23. They talk about, okay, well, they just went back to what they are last year. And there is this thought that this is the ceiling of what this program is. They're a historical loser. And, the projections that these media outlets have say that. I sent you something earlier in the year. The Massey rankings, which are done at a national level, will focus on every high school in the country. They have us finishing next to last in our region. They have us with a less than 5% chance to have a winning record this year. Actually, I think it's a less than 2% chance. They have us with a very little chance to make the playoffs. And as a coach, and I'm sure with your players, that's gotta really fuel the fire a little bit.
It absolutely does, because I think that what you said is exactly right. The outside perception is that's what we are. You know, we had a blip a couple of years ago where we were on the rise, just had a good run of kids, and that was it. And now we've got slipped back into what the norm and what the expected is for us. You know, I don't think that there's enough following of our program to understand the amount of youth, the tough schedule that we had last year, and how that was a perfect storm of a tough year. Because a couple of the coaches that we played late in the season, like, man, y'all really are that young, aren't you? Yeah, we are. So it's there. As I've said, you know, those are all logical reasons of why, but by no means are we going to use that as an excuse for what happened. And at the same time, you know, the outlets, the projections, and all those kinds of things, we're not going to let those be distractions, but we'll for sure use it as motivation because there's a little bit of chip on the shoulder of a lot of these guys that have seen us have success, saw the tough year last year, and want to prove that that's not us, and they definitely want to prove the outside noise wrong.
Have you what have you heard from player feedback? On that topic. Like how much does this mean to these guys to come back and make this right?
It's pretty easy to tell because the phrase that I keep using with them that resonates and I can tell just gets their blood pumping and the way they respond to it is are we going to prove them right or are we going to prove them wrong today? Because if we're proving the projections right, then we just go through things the way we used to, you know, the way we did last year. But if we're going to prove them wrong, we're going to go through things the way that we've talked about throughout the offseason and throughout the summer. And that's the way they answer the call every day.
Let's talk a little bit about this Thursday night coming up. Preview our matchup with northern neighbor, Northwest Whitfield here, Northern Whitfield County neighbor. Always a fun contest. First time it's ever been played on a Thursday night, so that's pretty cool. Making that short drive over to Tunnel Hill from Cahola Creek High School, and this is a game that has gotten kind of out of hand, honestly, the last couple of years. And I know that that's got to be in the back of your mind as a coach. And, I think after seeing the 21 and the 22 games and how competitive they were, what is it going to take to get back to making this game where it's a one-score game in the fourth quarter like it was those 2 years?
Well, number one is you got to give credit where credit's due. They've been really good football teams the last couple of years. So you can't deny that. And we've, last year, they were a really good football team, and we weren't, especially not at that point in the season. We didn't have any sort of identity on either side of the ball. But then there's been those sequences in the game where things have just gotten away from us, and then we hadn't been mature enough or resilient enough to respond in those. It's a turnover or a big play on offense, and then things just kind of spiral out. So we've got to be more resilient and deal with that because they've got good players. They're a good team, so they're going to make some plays, but it can't snowball into a couple of series in a quarter, and then we look up and we're down 3 scores. So that's a big deal. But the message I gave the team in the team meeting on Monday is, we've really focused in on emphasizing what is it that wins games for us. It's the turnovers, creating turnovers on defense, not turning the ball over on offense. It's missed tackles on defense and making guys miss on the offensive side of the ball, and eliminating explosive plays and creating explosive plays on the offensive side of the ball. So if we focus on those things every single rep, every single play we're out there, then that leads to the victory that we want, the results that we want. So I'm challenging our guys to make sure that our focus is there and not so big picture that we forget how to do our assignments, how to play physical, how to play fast and react.
Team captains were announced yesterday. It's the most that we've had since we've gone to this player and coach vote to award the team captains for the year. You started that back in your first year in 2023. I don't think we've ever had more than, I think we had 3 in 23. We only had 2 last year with Chevy and Isaac. Chevy's one of them again. It was kind of an expectation, I imagine. But alongside Chevy, Chris Ewert, Kobe King, and Waylon Belials all voted as captains by their peers and their coaches. I know in high school you were voted as a team captain by your peers, by your teammates. How much of an honor is that to represent the team in that way?
Was I high school and college? So
That's right. That's right. I forgot about college. Yeah.
probably one of the best honors you can get. I actually retweeted that with that quote. I think that might be the greatest honor as a football guy that you can get. To know that you've got that level of respect from your coaching staff and your teammates. It just is. I don't know. You can receive outside accolades from newspapers or media outlets, but the fact that the guys that are there with you every single day are voting on that for you, that speaks volumes to your character and your work ethic.
Yeah, those four guys have been exemplary in how they've worked and represented the program, and uh, you know, every one of them has a little bit of a different dynamic too. Kobe's kind of that quiet guy. He's I don't know what he's like at practice, but in my interactions with him, doing kind of these a lot of these preseason shoots and stuff the last year, he's very even keel, very very mild mannered, and he just wants to go out there and play. That's the gist I get from him. So
Yeah,
Chris,
he has probably seen the best progress. We always thought he had a ton of ability since he stepped on campus. But the fact that now you didn't know because he's starting as a sophomore, but then you see him kind of living up to that because of the work he's put in, I think speaks volumes to him.
yeah, and then Chris, even last year he was starting to become that emotional leader, and that's continued into this year. Something he's an emotional player too.
Yeah.
You can see that with him. He was to be quite honest, to be frank with the term, he was pissed off after the Lafayette scrimmage. I could tell he was mad on the sidelines. He didn't want to talk to anybody. He was very upset, and I'm sure that fueled him in practice. And he's talked candidly about how much he wants to just change the narrative about Cahola Creek football. So that's a guy you got to have as an emotional leader. Chevy is, I think, a little bit of both, and he's been just that steady cog in the machine of what Cahola Creek football's been the last 4 years. And then I think from a quarterback perspective, when you have a guy who can start developing into a leader, I think that only bodes well for the football team. If your quarterback is one of your best leaders, then that's a good thing.
Yeah. Yeah. Go back to Chris. We got how he's kind of the juice of the team. And the challenge with him is where's that gray area for him? Like, where does the emotion start to make you ineffective? We got to dial it and keep it in that gray area for him, where he's just where we need him to be, and his maturity has gotten him to that point. And I think the guys see that and they feed off of it. And to speak to Chevy, I don't know if you can say enough good things about him, but I think the simplest way with him, we know he's a football player for one, but he's kind of an alpha too. He's a state finalist in wrestling. He's an imposing figure when he walks in the door. And he's the type too. Coach Elsenrath probably says it the best. He could hand him the workout and walk out of the weight room, and Chevy being there by himself, and he'd come back drenched in sweat.
Yeah.
You just don't have to hold him accountable. And then you speak to Waylon, so proud of him, but a lot of that's kind of natural for him, just his personality. People are drawn to him. He's the type that can walk in a room, and not only can he read the thermostat, he kind of sets the thermostat. He's just that kind of guy that lifts everybody up, and everybody's kind of drawn to it.
Yeah, every quarterback has got to have a little bit of that swag about them. It's you got to teeter that line of swag and ego, I feel like, as a quarterback. Yeah. And if you're, I don't think you can be just this quiet, even keel. Like, I think you got to have those guys on your team, but I don't think it can be your quarterback if you're a successful team. He's got to have a little bit of that swag that the rest of the team can feed off of as a leader. So Uh, Coach, thank you for your time today. This has been kind of we'll call it a season preview, but this has been kind of a little bit of everything here. A preview of our first game, a overlook of our overall season as we get ready to go, recapping our first two scrimmages, and kind of previewing our quarterback position a little bit too, as we didn't do that with the rest of our assistant coaches. And This is going to be kind of the format this year with our we're going to kind of just transition from calling it the Cahola Creek Football Show and just keep our CreekCast branding throughout the season for all of our game recaps. We'll include highlights and all that kind of stuff, but we're just going to restructure it a little bit this year. We've seen that a lot of you like this CreekCast branding and have tuned into that, so we're excited about that. And excited about everything we've got going on this year. There's a lot of interest and momentum from our community. Everybody in Colt Country seems to be really dialing into our content and what we've been putting out, and we're really excited to bring more of that to you this year and bring a more exciting product. And I can't wait to get on the mic and call our first game Thursday night.
I don't think you're the only one. It's hard to sit still right now. The challenge is can we finish the week of practice the way we need to and not look too far down the tracks?
Yeah, well, just less. I mean, I guess 2 days. That's it. By the time some of you are watching this, it'll be less than 2 days. So excited about that, and that'll wrap it up. Go Colts! Good luck Thursday night, Coach.
Thank you.